Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Mark from Jazz Guitar Lessons, and in this episode I want us to explore a lot of different chord shapes and adding interest in comping without having to rely solely on learning a whole bunch of inversions, without stacking thirds on papers and doing all this analysis. We're not going to do that. We're not going to make things too complicated. So in a nutshell, the background for this video is I encounter a lot of students that will hear Ed Bickert or a Joe Pass kind of record and go, wow, they comp on standards. And they never stay on the same chord shape, right? Like if you had a typical rock or blues song, you could have the chord shape and basically strum it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, that's part of the style. But in jazz, I say without it being superior, the exploration harmonically of these different concepts and chords will mean that seldom will we sit on the same chord for a long time. We'll add a note, we'll add interest, we'll articulate in different fashions. That's sort of a problem that people are trying to crack. So cracking the code, a well-meaning student will say, well, I grabbed Ted Green's Chord Chemistry, the book, or I grabbed this book of Joe Pass chord melody arrangements and I have to do all of this in drilling so that perhaps maybe when I comp on a standard, then these voicings will come up. And I'm like, well, that's pretty much brute force approach. If it works for you, great. I have an alternative, which I'll describe in detail in this video. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, you may be listening to this in your favorite audio podcast format. So off we go. The easy solution is to start with shells. Right, so before you change the channel and stop this, you say, I know my shells, it doesn't quite yield a benefit. Bear with me. I have an approach that's unique to looking at shells, which is basically called shell plus 1 and shell plus 2, which in a matter of a single moment, like a minute with the guitar in hand here, you'll be able to play over a dozen chords of the same name. So if you see A7 on a cheat sheet, like a lead sheet of sorts, you will be able to play a dozen chords within about a minute. And this is not like clickbait or anything. It's just the way we think about those is much simpler than, one, trying to learn all chord inversions and all the versions of the same chord. It's much simpler than, say, the Barry Harris approach where you need a bebop scale, you need this passing diminish between. I love that stuff, but it's a bit too much. And we don't have either to stack thirds on paper, right? People say, well, I got to find out all of the chords and stacking these thirds for all the chords in that scale, and then I'll take all my chords and add a ninth to it. We don't need to any of that. Actually, we need just two notes. And in this episode, I will go in depth in how to use the two notes and how to build what I call my shell plus 1 and shell plus 2 on top of it. So off we go. First off, we'll just start with an A. So I have the guitar in hand, and the A note will be our open strings. You could start with a 5th fret bar like this, like a good old A7 rocker or blues kind of bar, which works. So the first thing we'll do is we'll let go of that root, we'll let go of that 5th, and we'll wind up with these two notes in the middle. Now, these two notes are what I would call the shells. People say they're the guide tones. Essentially, it's a 3rd and the 7th, or actually the 7th and the 3rd of the A7 chord. So I'll keep referring to the A with my open strings here because it's just easier for me to keep providing a bass note for sonic reference through this episode. So simply, now we completely hear an A7 chord with the 7th and 3rd on top. Some people will call this a 10th, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So a 10th is the double of a 3rd, right? Good, we got that down. After this is done, what we may start to explore is the fact that on the top strings, we can have more extensions and notes that pertain to that chord and that scale. Namely, let's start with the B string. So we have the D and the G string with the two guide tones, and then I'll add that E, which I can bar, and now you'll recognize that plain old A7, right? And if I move up to an F13, F sharp, it's an A7 13 shape, right? And then to the G, right? So already, coming from our good old bar of A7, or that open A7, I have 1, 2, or say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're already up to half a dozen versions of the same chord that is melodically deployed, and that we can have several permutations of this. So right now, let's just keep going on the top string. So what I would do is call what we had with the B string shell plus 1. So that's shell, and then that shell plus 1. Also shell plus 1. Also shell plus 1. Notice we didn't dig into drop 2 inversions and all complicated matter. We're just harmonizing and keeping the guide tones the same at the bottom. On the top string, what do we get? Well, of course we can get the A, so that's the tonic, that's the root of the chord. Pretty bland, pretty boring. Although it could be used by Wes like... Right, it could be used harmonically and melodically. Now we have the ninth, which is the B note. And then we may transfer to another sort of inversion of that chord. I may go C sharp here, right? C sharp D, so that chord is actually none other than this, but an octave higher. Or this, an octave higher, right? So just to recap, A, B, C sharp, D, that's a suspended E, right? So now we sort of inverted it, and just to show you the secret of that, the secret of the trade is that A7, now we have another, what we would call an inversion. So you know that shape A9 at the top? Now instead of having the 7th and the 3rd, like we had with our open string, now we have the 3rd and 7th. So here is G and C sharp, here's C sharp and G. So we reach the other shell, if you will. Right? Good. And then we put it on top string, so I add the B, so it's a 9th, and I had the E, which is the 5th, and then we're all safe. So to recap, and to show you what implicitly I've been talking about without naming it, is the fact that we have, say, a plain shell. Then we have the shell plus 1, so that's one plane, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 versions of the chord plus your good old bar that you already knew, right? So already, without looking at any inversions, without stacking thirds, without learning any theory, if I'm in the world of chords melody and there's a passage of a song that has an A7 and I need to harmonize it or I want to do something to it to accompany, then here's the stuff. It's right there, if you catch my drift, right? So we have built a semblance of chord vocabulary from the simple concept of grabbing the shells, the shell tone, so the 3rd and the 7th, and then adding the stuff on top. Furthermore, this illuminates a way that it enlightens, let's say, the word in French we say illuminer, so it's the French to enlighten, the way that I like to conceive of the fretboard. So spotlight on the fretboard here, what I love to have is to have the A and E string as the 2 bass strings. So I will not even consider them other than doing like, or, right, they will serve as walking or as root notes or fifths, alternating. That works, right? And then we have the 2 middle strings on the guitar. So middle, I mean the D and G, which are actually, in our case here, we have the G and C sharp and C sharp and G. And these 2 strings that are actually the middle of the guitar will always give me the color, the modality and the tonality of the chord. So I got my bass covered. I got my, okay, what chord is this? And then guess what? We've just done it together. The top string, they give me the opportunity to play melodically like this. So this encapsulates the way that I do fretboard navigation for myself. Still to this day, this is how I think of the guitar. I still see a good old bar shape in my mind, my mind's eye. This is how I play, and this is how I teach also in my coaching, which is just a fascinating way to look at actually having only 2 locations for each chord. So you have A7 or A13 here, and A9 up there, and that's it. Okay, some of you guys will say, well, yes, but Mark, what about this inversion? Yeah, of course, okay. This is not all of the jazz guitar voicings that are available, all right? It's about 80 to 90% of what I personally play and love, and I can get out of trouble pretty easily with all these shapes. And again, we haven't done all of the strings, all the notes, all the possibilities yet, and we have about 10 different voicings for our good old A7. Not a bad trade-off. I told you we're maybe runtime 10 minutes into this video. That's over a voicing per minute, and you don't need to memorize anything, to write anything, or to do any complicated theory. I want to go 2 or 3 notches further for you advanced guys. If you're not sure about this, you can look in the description for a handout for staples. So the staples are basically these chords that I started with, but with still the root on it, right? So that would be one and that would be the other. And then the staples have some movement and whatever, but we really get the town when we start to look at the staples and remove the bass notes. And actually, I didn't tell you guys, but this is how we started this video, this episode, which is, okay, we just start with removing the bass notes. We want to move stuff around. So if you feel it's a bit too advanced, you can grab the handout. It's for free. It's in the description. And learn these shells, these staples, implement them super well on standards, and then you can come back to this for the movements about the shells. If you're a bit more advanced and you're interested, now we'll keep exploring some more melody notes on top. So one of the best things I can do for that is to look at that A7, which would be, say, a Mixolydian scale, if you know your theory. Right, so it's like a major chord with a flat 7, right? A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A, right? And I will start at the bottom, so I go A, still my open A. And I could do like, I could invert those, so I'm cheating out my sort of fretboard navigation, but just for a moment. So I got A, then I get B, and then I got C sharp, right? A, B, C sharp, D. Then there's multiple ways to do it. I'm just going to do a sus, but you could do it any other way. And then I go to my E, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, E. So take notice, with the same idea, I started here, and I went all the way to here. That's a lot of different notes that I can cover, so I pretty much guarantee that if you're doing chord melody, you have a melody that's within an octave and a half, or 2 octaves, you will have the fuel or the vocabulary to harmonize these with this simple approach, right? And if you know more voicings and you decide to put the shell or the 3rd and 7th on a different set of strings, of course, do it, please do it. But in order to simplify this process, here we go, we got that. And now this further along in the episode, this is where I'll say, yeah, I just done A7. What if you did on your own the work with a major chord or a minor chord? So a major chord in this case would be, say, you have a major 7th and a major 3rd. I love to, like, you guys know my stuff probably, I love the 6 because it sounds softer. So I'll do it this way, but if you did a major 7th, it's perfectly fine, and you can pretty much do the same work. So even a sharp 11, Lydian. And you can do good old like this, and then this one I don't like this much, and then here. How about? Oh, that's a drop tune version. My bad. So, but you can explore and go like, oh yeah, major scale, and you can do all of these notes and just tinker out of time. Tinker all the notes of the major scale that you have accessible. So I love to use the term, I melodize my chords. And it's, I keep saying this is like air, it's like breathing, it's for free. Well, unless it's very polluted where you live, but you catch my drift. It's like you don't need to take years of lessons or get any book or workshops. You just need to sort of work it out on a major chord. Then replicate with a minor. You do A minor 7. How about that? There you go. Something like that. And I will cheat out and maybe, oh, you want to do natural 6 versus a flat 6? Well, yeah, you can explore all these options. You could do fancier chord like minor 6. You could do minor major 7. But the whole point is, now what's the context? What does the tune call for? And once you have set those and you're able to navigate with your 3rd and 7ths on your D and G string, then you can play multiple songs and you'll encounter typical progressions like a 2 and a 5 and a 1. So you go, well, while I can make that change, say I'm playing a blues, I know I'm going from an A7 in this case, right? We're going to play the blues, and then it goes to a D7. Like I can segue from the A7 into the D7 with that stuff that I built up over the top strings. But again, keeping it simple, keeping it so I can keep my head straight and always know which chord I'm playing, because it's solely based on the 3rd and 7th on these guide tones. And even while I don't play these guide tones personally, they still show up, they still light up on my fretboard, which is extremely useful. And now for even more advanced guys, I want to get into more tones to harmonize for the shell +1 +2. So we haven't talked about it yet, but I played a snippet on the A blues. This is totally a Wes move, right? So you hear these notes on the A7 before going down to the D. Like, wow, okay, what's that? So this stuff is what we call altered tones. And what I recommend you do, especially for an A7, which is a dominant chord, it would be to harmonize all of the notes of the chromatic scale, all 12 of them, maybe except the one. So the one I'm talking about is the F sharp. If you play like this over a dominant chord, unless it's passing, it's going to sound like you're playing a major, like, right? It's going to sound like that. But all the other notes are up for grabs. So it means you have 12 notes you could harmonize. And see what I mean. If I do my shell plus 1 again, I'll do just shell, right? Open A. And I do fifth. Well, I'm allowed to do sharp 5. The 13, up to the 7th, the G, 13, sharp 5, natural 5, flat 5. Right, so that's just on one string. So imagine I can harmonize from here to here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 notes that are allowed, quote unquote, to be played on that B string for free. It's just there, right? So I just got to find a way. In this case, if I use my index and second finger, I will play these notes that are further up. But if I need to play the note that's behind on the 4th fret, I need to reconfigure my D and G string. In this case, I use a second and third finger. So that's just the gymnastics of it. That's like looking at Lenny Bro stuff, going, okay, how did he finger that? Okay, cool. It's simple in theory, but then the fingering issue becomes an issue. So that's the B string. And then what about the top string? So I'll start with my A. Then I can have the flat 9. That's a B flat. The natural 9. I can have the sharp 9. This is what I played. Right, so this one is sharp 9 and sharp 5. And just so you know, guys, when we start to harmonize like this, an altered chord will tolerate any other alterations. Meaning that if I put a flat 9, I can also put a sharp 5 on it, which would be flat 9, sharp 5, like this. But my shell is the same. I still see the same darn thing in my mind. And it's beautiful because I started here again. I'm going to keep climbing. That's a flat 5, natural 5. I could keep going with different tones, but then it becomes a matter of color. Like, do I actually want that 13 along with a flat 5? Like, you pick. But the whole point is, again, it's all there, and it's only based on having the 3rd and the 7th in the proper place. So I won't get into too much detail, but here's how I would, an example of harmonizing this. So from the A on the G string, flat 9, natural 9, sharp 9. Yeah, I know it's low, right? It's like, this is the Hendrix chord, guys. It's a Hendrix chord, but it's an octave lower. I love that. So sharp 9 to the 3rd, to the sus, so the 4, to the sharp 4 or flat 5, to the 5 with a lower flat 9, to the sharp 5, to the 13, to the flat 7, to the A again, to the 9 natural, to the sharp 9, to the 3rd, to the sus, to the sharp flat 5 or sharp 4, to the 5. And I could keep going, but the point is, like, look, you started from here on your 3rd string and you went all the way here, or here even. So you have almost 2 octaves of voicings. And remember, we didn't have to do the whole shebang of, okay, well, I have to write my thirds down, so C, E, G, B, and which notes are included in the chord and which chord I'm allowed to play. Oh, I have to do all these diatonic chords, so C major to D minor, like I'm going to play the chords in the scale. It's like, well, yeah, those are good, but in the spirit of like playing, I highly, highly recommend you just go through having that shell set up and then seeing what fits on top, so that for me, as far as being a comper, this always lights up on my guitar fretboard. And as far as being a soloist, it's the same thing. I will be playing and stab a chord in the middle of the solo, and people, like my students, will say, well, when did you know how to stab a chord? Then I'd go, well, I'm always comping. In my mind, I'm always going to that shape, because the progression, say we did the blues in A, it's just like, that's only what I see in my mind's eye. 1, 2, 3, 4, to the D chord, back to the A, maybe to the E7, right? 5. So I see that's a very simple blues, but the point is like A's here, D's here, and E's here. With these 3 little bit of tritones, I can do everything. And if I get bored and I'm like, oh, this is too low, I want to go and shred here, I have this other inversion. So now, speaking of which, this is a proper inversion, meaning that here we have the G and C sharp. Now we have C sharp and G. So it's an inversion of an interval, which is the proper musical term for doing an inversion. Now I had the 2 notes. I just reverted their order, but they're the same name, the same label of notes. So the same thing applies. I had my blues here, A, D, A, E, 4, 5, 1 blues, guys, right? And then here, to D, to E, E, D, A. So it's all there. Then of course there's a blues scale. Then you go, well, when you look at that, my favorite note of the blues scale, that's a sharp 9. Okay, so then I can pick up blues licks in which I realize, I'm just doing an altered dominant of sorts, if I want to think about it this way. So I can still shred my blues lines, but I can always come back to this semblance of comping or doing chords solo while having that in mind. And go ahead, check it out, guys. Go fetch maybe a YouTube of Wes Montgomery. When he's soloing, the typical plan for his like post-bop era, like mid-60s, would be to start with single lines and then to go in octaves, and then later in his solo he would just do chord solos. So you'll hear him like, right, like he'll do all these things. He's not actually thinking of a bunch of different chords. He's thinking, that's A7 and then we're going to D7. That's what he's thinking about. Well, I think I would tend to believe so, because I tend to want to simplify things. Like all of this happening in this present video is all A7 in my mind. Although for, say, an external audience member or a student to go, wow, you know all of these chords. But I'm like, well, I know the one, I know that one chord, which is the A, which, knowing everything we know about scales and chords and combining them, and now showing you the secret to navigating a fretboard, 2 bottom bass notes, middle strings being the guide tones, and then the 2 top strings being the shell. So shell plus 1, shell plus 2 strings. Knowing that, I don't think of more than one chord. I think of the chord, which is A7, and all of its several ramifications. I'd rather think about it this way, so that when I tackle a tune and I see an A7, then all of this stuff lights up in the proper place, in the proper moment, provided I hear it, right? Provided I have the chops to deliver that. So on that note, that's all I wanted to get to you in this episode. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Please do check out the Staples cheat sheet as a free download, as a handout that you can work on. Implement this stuff on standards, guys. Let me know if there's anything that was unclear you'd like me to follow up on. I just want to drop you a line and say thank you for listening, subscribing, watching these videos, posting the comments, because the stuff that I create is actually based on you guys' feedback and comments. So I'll see you in the next episode. Take care. Thank you.